Hello, everyone. Mike Settele here for our September Oh, I think I already talked too early. Great, messed it up already. Hey, everyone. Mike Settele here for our September SAT live stream. Hopefully, you guys are feeling good about it. You're less than a week away from that, so that's super fun. We're going to talk about maybe a couple questions tonight. I want to show you some new things that I've been working on. And if you have general questions about the test, I'm happy to do my best to answer them as always. But just as a reminder, I have no actual knowledge of what specific questions are going to be on the September SAT. So I have no idea what specific questions you're going to get. But if you've been preparing, then you should have a good idea of which topics are going to come up on the test, because those things do not change, at least not in any sort of major way, right? The way that those topics show up, the way that they ask about those topics definitely changes, but it's not something that's going to really involve a lot of surprises. So hello, Arrow. Hello, Daniel. Good to see you guys. Thank you for joining. If you are let me know too. Are you taking the September SAT, or are you just here to hang out? That'd be good to know. And if you took the August SAT as well, if you have any thoughts on that, feel free to share them. And all that good stuff. This is a busy time of year for SATs. We've got the August SAT, the September 13th SAT. There's one at the beginning of October, and then beginning of November, and beginning of December. So it is quite busy. Most of you, if you are seniors this year, will be done with all of this fairly soon. So that is one thing to maybe hold you over and make you feel good about where you're headed. Let's see here. I want to do a couple different things. Let's blur my background a little bit so that the bookshelf is not as distracting. And can you score a 1300 if I only studied for 1 week? It depends where you are compared to the 1300. If you're at a 1200, then maybe. But if you're at a 1000, then no, probably not. So yes, 100 points in a month, definitely doable. So Arrow, you're definitely in a good spot there. That's doable. So we'll talk about different things that you should be focusing on. Let me share this and I'll show you guys some cool stuff. Yes, this should work. Cool. All right. This is my website. And if you just follow me on YouTube, you might not ever have seen this, but setelletutoring.com is the website. And it's really useful for different things. And I've been working on some stuff here. The thing that I have been working on literally today, I'm going to show you guys because it might answer some questions right off the bat in terms of what should you do, what you'd be looking at these last 2 days. I've been redoing the library of resources on my site. So here, if you go to my homepage and then go to practice, and I'll put this link in the description as well. In fact, let me just do it now. setelletutoring.com/library. There it is. That is that's this page, and it used to look a lot different, and it's still a work in progress. So be patient. You guys might find things that don't work, and feel free to let me know about that. But basically what I'm trying to do is organize my resources from YouTube a little bit better. I find that YouTube is great for hosting things, but not so great for organizing and navigating and just knowing all the videos that I have. So my hope is now you can kind of search it in 3 different ways. Lessons and guides. This is going to be the stuff that's usually quicker. These are going to be lessons on particular topics. If you click it, you'll see that there's a bunch of strategy videos here, and this is kind of the meat of my channel. These are the things that you'd find on my YouTube channel itself. Very quickly, the 10-step study plan is really great if you have about 10 weeks, maybe 8 weeks to prepare for your test. So if you're taking the September SAT, hopefully you're already deep into this. If you're taking the October SAT, you can still kind of get on it. But that's going to consist of a bunch of different ways to kind of also navigate these resources. And then it'll start off with the strategy series. So that's what these things are here: dumb summaries, vocabulary. There's 10 episodes. This is a great thing to do, even if you've only got 1 week. I forget who said it before, but if you've only got 1 week to study and there's not that much time, the one thing to do is watch my strategy series. That can make a big difference. But you can also search based on different topics like grammar, and you can see that same episode on grammar is going to show up, but so will a bunch of other different things on topics. Different rules, for example, are going to have different lessons. So those are great ways to just get little pieces of information. Some of them have descriptions. I'm still working on filling all this out. So it's a work in progress, but it's a great way to kind of organize some things a little bit better than YouTube has. You'll also see if you are one of my channel members. I know, Daniel, you're one, so great. I know it's been difficult sometimes to get through all the stuff that I've made and made available to channel members. You have your own separate tab there that has links to the playlist. So if you do want to practice apostrophes, you can go right there, go right to that playlist with all those questions that I wrote all about apostrophes. And if you want to learn more about that, then there you go. There's a little link to do that. And then the thing that's still being worked on is I'm trying to organize my way of giving you guys access to the question bank questions. I've made videos for a large portion of the question bank, especially the reading, and it's just hard to organize. So it's mostly because of the way that the College Board has organized things. It's not ideal. So I'm trying my best to get it up to some level that it's useful. But for now, what you can do is go to my site, and I have my own categories for a lot of these questions. So here's the grammar. And you can see I've got some labels, some ways to kind of sort through this and see the different types of questions. And these are the ID numbers that go with those questions. There are two different kinds of question bank that the College Board has released, the educator question bank and the student question bank. That's why there are two ID numbers for most questions. I haven't gotten them all organized yet, so you'll see some only have one, but ideally, eventually you'll have two. And you can even search, and here, I'll just copy this one. And this is the part that might break my website if all you guys start using it at once, but we'll see what happens and go from there. But hopefully, if you are looking for a particular explanation video, hopefully I've labeled it correctly. Hopefully it will work and will show up when you search this. If it has a video that I've already made with explaining the question, there'll be a little red YouTube icon there that will take you directly to it. And no. Okay, sorry. You'll have to watch some sort of ad. That's good. That helps me. So sorry, you have to do that. But then you can at least get your explanation for that question. So hopefully that is something that is useful to you guys. I'm definitely open to lots of feedback on this. So please, if you're using it and think it could be better in some way, do not hesitate to share that. That would be really, really useful for me. So yeah, that's what I've been working on. Hopefully you guys like it. Did we have another question here? Taking in October, looking to jump 100 points. Cool. All right. Yes. So if you do have specific questions, feel free to ask them either about these resources, different things for this last week. My main advice is, remember, you should be kind of tapering off with your practice as you get closer and closer to the Saturday test. You really do not want to be studying the night before the SAT. Maybe something low key, maybe some of these lesson videos on a topic like grammar that's pretty easy. Maybe review some things like the XY plane, the circle equation, some Desmos features. This number of solutions stuff is pretty important. Those are great things to kind of passively review, but really on Friday, you do not want to be working on practice questions. You want to be saving your brain for the test. You're going to need it. You definitely do not want to be taking another practice test. I think the last time you can really do that is maybe Wednesday if you happen to be off for school for any reason. But otherwise, at that point, if you haven't taken a practice test, that ship has sailed. The real test is your practice test. What would I say is the hardest part in the English? For sure, the passages, for sure. At least for me, because it maybe depends on the person. But I would always say that's the hardest because when those questions are hard, they're really hard. And we do have a lot of really tough stuff. We have a lot of dense vocabulary. The sentences can be confusing. The answer choices can be long and confusing. Sometimes we get those charts. Those kind of stink. And so I've got lessons on those. You can kind of do that. That's a fairly new lesson on the charts and graph questions. I'm pretty proud of that. So those can be really, really rough. And plus, the way that I pace myself on the SAT reading, those are always the last questions I'm doing, the passages. So I don't have a lot of time to get through those things. You can't, lollygag and just take your time on each question and try to find, 100% proof of every answer. You have to be thinking of it in terms of, like a bet. You're placing a bet. I have a 10% chance of getting it right versus an 80% chance of getting it right. An 80% chance is great. 80% is a win on some of those hard questions. So take it and move on. The amount of work you might need to do to get to 90% confidence is very hard. And so I'm always thinking about good enough. How good enough can it be before I move on to the next thing? So I find those passages really hard. I find the easiest part of the reading to be the outline questions, which is why I have so few resources on that. I find them pretty straightforward. Grammar is also up there in terms of easiness. I have lots of lessons on grammar though, because at least that is much more, I don't know, what's the word? Controllable, predictable. We know what rules they're going to be. They don't really stray from those rules. And even the weird stuff still follows those rules. So yeah, I do not like the passages. How do we access what? This page? Just go to the link at the top where I think I pinned it. It should be there. That's going to take you to this resource library, and it should be available to everyone. If not, let me know, because maybe I programmed something wrong. I do all my own programming, so I'm not an expert at that. I'm an SAT expert, but the programming thing, I'm winging it. So my website, it's as good as it's going to be for someone who's an amateur. Okay. So I guess Ag, that's your name. I joined a couple minutes ago. Are those kind of September predictions? If that is, I need them. I'm taking SAT on the 13th of October. So there is no such thing. Let me be very clear to everyone. There is no such thing as September SAT predictions or October SAT predictions. Anyone who claims to know exactly what's going to be on the test is either lying or has broken into the Blue Book app and is cheating in some way. So no one has any knowledge other than the knowledge that comes from having a lot of experience with the SAT. I've taken all the Blue Book practice tests. I've looked at every one of the question bank questions, or most of them, I guess, not all of them, but most of them. And so I know what's going to come up on the test because those patterns repeat themselves. They're going to ask questions in slightly different ways from what you would see on the practice tests or the question bank, but they are still doing it in a way that the underlying idea is very, very clear. So I'm going to, toot my own horn a little bit. These channel membership things are really, really awesome because for something like this connector placement rule, which is one of the hardest grammar rules for the SAT, it's right here. This playlist is going to give you 10 questions that all involve that rule in some way. And maybe the first 5 or so are fairly standard versions of that. But then I get pretty clever and I try to twist it up and I try to show you things that kind of throw you off. And that's meant to kind of show you that level of flexibility that you need for the SAT, for any type of question, not just grammar, but basically because they're testing the same few things in lots of different ways, but there's some sort of core idea that's always consistent. And so that's the kind of thing that can anchor you as you go through this set of questions is like, okay, the rule, the process is the same. There might be slightly different ways that we go, different paths we go down as the sentences change, but the underlying rule is the same. And I think it's very important to be thinking about the SAT in those ways in order to do well. A lot of people don't do well on the SAT, or I should say, a lot of people do worse on the real SAT compared to the practice tests because they don't think about it in that flexible way. They are very strict about how they think about things. I need to memorize these particular steps, and if I don't follow these steps, then I'm going to get it wrong. But if I do, then I will get it right. Well, unfortunately, flexibility is going to be required for the hardest questions. Sometimes we got to kind of break our process a little bit, and we can control maybe 85, 90% of the SAT if we really practice, but that other 15 or 10%, that's where cleverness comes in, problem solving, puzzle solving, all that stuff, very, very important. That's a long-winded question. Let me go back and see what else we got asked. So yes, my point is October SAT, September SAT, it's all the same. Just keep studying, and no matter what SAT you take, you will be ready. Daniel, for central ideas and details, is the correct answer something which is often repeated in the passage? Ooh, that is a good question. I don't know how to answer that. Let's see. I would say a good kind of way to think about that particular question is maybe doing the strong words overview. Since you're a member, I don't know if you've done this one yet, but this one's pretty good. The trouble is with the passages, on the one hand, yes, you are going to always need to answer the question based on what's in the passage, right? We don't need to go with our own assumptions. We don't need to go with our own knowledge. It's all based on what's in the passage. However, one of the most common ways the SAT tries to trick us is they do what I call copy-paste traps. A copy-paste trap is when there's some weird phrase in the passage, something you've probably never seen before, just an interesting combination of words, a definition, something odd, something memorable. And then they take that weird phrase and they paste it into one of the answer choices. And the fact that you see that weird phrase in the passage and that same weird phrase in the choices makes you think, it's there, it must be right. But you always have to remember the choice is composed of several pieces. And just because one piece matches with the passage doesn't mean that the other pieces do as well. So rather than try to look for matching ideas, which we do need to do, it's also important to look for things that don't match. Look for words in the answer choices that do not show up, or I shouldn't say words, I should say ideas in the choices that do not show up in the passage. And a great way to kind of think about that is this episode 7 on trap answers. This is available to everyone. This is one of the free resources. This is one of the best things ever made. It is really, really useful for thinking about how the SAT comes up with trap answers. And so I definitely recommend that. That's a great one to watch sometime this week, even if you've already watched it, just as a review. It's a really good one. So it really hits on that idea of there being some strong words we need to focus on, and that those strong words have some patterns that we can usually get. So I know that, again, I love a long-winded answer, but Daniel, you got to be careful. Sometimes if you pick an answer just because it shares the same wording as a passage, you might be falling for a trap. It's better to think less in terms of specific words that need to match and more about general ideas that need to match. You're getting around 1500 to 1540 on your practice test. I just hope September SAT isn't geometry or dense reading focus. Well, yeah, I mean, this is a great point. Dismal, I don't know how to say it, but I'm trying my best. That's a great point. Is a lot of the time when you get closer and closer to the top of the scores, it ends up being kind of this like luck of the draw, right? What kinds of questions do I get? The ideal situation to consistently be above 1500 is that it doesn't matter. You practice in a way where it doesn't matter which topics happen to show up on your particular test. And that's why people sometimes say, oh, this test was harder, this test was easier. What they're really saying is this test was harder for me because it gave me a lot of questions that matched my weaknesses, right? So I got more questions than usual that I'm bad at. And that can happen. That's unfortunate. But ideally, if you're practicing in a way where you have no weaknesses, then it should be the case that no matter what comes up in the test, you're good to go. A great example of that is statistics. Look at these weird things I made. A lesson on box plots, a lesson on margin of error, standard deviation, a little bit more common. Those 3 in particular are things that you might never see on your SAT. I bet if you've taken like 4 or 5 practice tests, you still might never have seen a question that involves a box plot. But it's kind of a simple idea. It's a pretty common idea, and it might not be common on the SAT, but it's not a complex idea, I guess is what I want to say. And so those are the kinds of things that you don't want to throw you off. And that can throw you off if you just never encountered it through the practice test. So that's why for some of these topics like geometry, like statistics, casting a wide net is really important. So that way, if you do get that kind of 1 in a million topic, you're still good to go. But yeah, it is tricky because there's only so much your brain can hold, and it's hard to memorize a lot of things. But the ideal is that you're ready for box plots, even if you don't get one. You're ready with that information. So that might be something to look at. All right, so let's keep going here. You guys are good questions today. 1450 on the August SAT. This is Yasser, 70 English, 700 math. Oh, well, that was just a nice compliment. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. What do I think about the August SAT? I did not take it personally, so I do not know anything in particular about this test. But speaking from experience for the other tests that I've taken, I would bet that the August SAT was a lot like the June SAT, a lot like the May SAT, a lot like the March SAT, and it'll be a lot like the September and October and November SATs. It's very consistent. And also remember, there is no the August SAT anymore because people are all over the world are taking the test and it's digital. So everyone's getting different questions. You might get some questions that your friends got, but also you might get some that they didn't. Even if you both get in the same modules, it's just random now. And so there's different versions of the test. So it's not like we can say this is the August SAT. It's going to be a lot of variety, even more so than it used to be. All right, Arav has a problem with overthinking questions. Yeah. Well, this is a big problem for a lot of people on the test, on the real test, especially because nervousness sets in. My one piece of advice for that is make sure that you do not change your strategy from the practice test to the real test, right? So a good example of that is people use, the dumb summaries, right? The dumb summaries that I talk about quite a lot. My first lesson, my first strategy episode here, they use those to analyze the poems on the SAT, to think about the transition words and the vocab questions. And that's great. They work. I use them myself when I take the test. But for some reason, when people get into the actual test and that clock is ticking and they're nervous and they really want to get to all the questions, they think, I don't need to write a dumb summary, or writing a dumb summary will take too long. I'm going to skip that step because I want to get to more questions. And they start abandoning those strategies that helped them all along. And I think it's just nervousness. It's second guessing, like you're saying. And it's not a good way to go about the test, because you're abandoning the very thing that got you those higher scores in the practice test. You have to stick to it. It might mean that, yes, you run out of time and can't answer all the questions, but at least the ones you do answer, if you're following the strategies that you were using to get them right before, you should get them right again. So the most important thing is just, no matter how much that little voice in your head is telling you, got to move faster, got to skip this step, got to do this, try to stick to it, stick to the plan. I also like to think of it in terms of second guessing. You really don't want to change an answer unless you have a because, right? So you go back to that hard passage question. You were between choices A and B, and you're deciding which one. You picked B originally. Should I pick A? Should I switch to A? Unless you have a because, a reason, you don't want to switch. A feeling is not a reason. If you are looking at that other answer and you want to switch to it, you have to be able to say in your head, I am picking A because I didn't see that word before. I'm picking A because I misunderstood what this word was saying, right? You have to have a reason. If your reason is just like nervousness and like, I got to change something, that's not a good reason. That's where you end up getting wrong answers. Just, you had a reason before when you picked B in the first place, so just stick with it. So that's a great example of like, just stick to the plan as well. Otherwise, get a good night's sleep. Sleep really matters for second guessing and nervousness. You just, you gotta, try to think of it like following instructions. Okay. Ooh, message retracted sounds very, very, I don't know, just ominous. Lots of hard vocab and on the August SAT. Yep. It's going to happen. There's going to be random words that you've never seen, that we try our best to study words, but it does happen that they go away, or that we get ones we've never seen. Yeah. So Daniel, the vocab thing, I in my haste of just showing this, it got hidden. But if you want to find it, just type vocab. I think that'll do it. Let's see. Yeah. Just type vocab in there. It's there. So yeah, I'll put the link back up on that library page, but I just wanted to make it go live for this. So it's kind of missing now, but yeah, it's there. Just type vocab under my website and that should work. All right. Let's see what else we got. Last minute advice for math. Yeah, make sure you know as many topics as possible really well. I think things like lines, quadratics, y equals mx plus b, these are things that people really underestimate. So many questions about lines, about quadratics. It's very easy to kind of ignore that. And we end up a lot of times being told a lot of valuable information about, let's say, a parabola, but we don't have the vocabulary. We don't see them, when they throw the word maximum in, we have to recognize that that's code for like the A value is less than 0 because it opens upside down. So those things, that code that they talk about, really important. So this is a great lesson to make sure you've got that down. But of course, stick to the strategies right above it. Plug points and equations. Like there's literally nothing else on my brain. Most of the time I'm doing math questions in the SAT. I just keep asking myself the same thing. Do I have points? Do I have equations? If the answer to both is yes, plug them in. If not, I'm looking for a point, I'm looking for an equation. I might make it up. I might, use my memory. There's lots of things to do, but that's kind of like a nice little mantra that that just keeps reminding you of where to get back to like a centered place. Cool. Yeah, pin comment is my website. Thank you, Dragon Fruit, for directing. I've hard reading through the scientific reading prompts. The similar scientific names along with weird structure gets pretty confusing. Yes. So the main thing with the science stuff is, remember, this isn't a science test. So don't worry too much about like the new thing they're introducing to you. It's what they're saying about that thing that matters. So stick to strong words that are consistent across all passage types. I always say the most important strong word in any passage is but. But is a great word. However, while, despite this, instead, any word that means but is going to have a really big impact on how we understand the passage. Not every passage has a but it's still a thing that you should notice when you see it. Most of the time, too, they'll tell us some sort of relationship. They'll say something, they thought something mattered, but it doesn't matter. Or this thing matters more, or this thing matters less. So there's this positive correlation, negative correlation. Those kinds of relationship words are what the passage is really about. They're not really about the science itself. So I would say the strong words and trap answers episodes are really great for that. This logic inference one, really great for that too. Kind of gets into how we're supposed to think about those questions. So those things should help with the science too. Let's see. Do you think it matters the distribution of your score? So like if you get more in English than math, would that matter that much in admissions to colleges? The combined score matters more. It really depends on the college and what you're applying to. If you are applying to be a math major and your reading score is 790, but your math score is 620, they're going to be like, what the heck? Why do you want to be a math major? Why do you want to be an engineer if your math is worse, right? Why not do something that's related to your strength? So I don't think it's a big deal in most cases that there's like a discrepancy between the two, but think about what you're applying for. And they if you are applying for some sort of math program, some engineering science program, they're going to look at that math score probably a little bit more. And if it's better, they'll reward you for that. Yeah. Ronald, you're welcome. Thank you for joining. I have this problem in the reading where I read a passage as arrow. I don't understand. Oh, and Arrow, thanks for joining. I think I saw a thing before. I was talking, but I think I saw you join the membership. So cool. Very cool. Thank you for joining. And let me know if you have questions about how to use it. But let's see what your question is right now. I have this problem in the reading when I read a passage I don't understand or interpret what I'm reading, and it causes me to lose time. Okay. So the biggest piece of advice, right? I mean, there's a reason I call the main strategy for reading dumb summaries. I really think it's important to like embrace your dumbness and how your brain can dumb things down. And so it's not necessarily about understanding what you're reading. There's maybe some very, very dumb version of that, right? Sometimes it's as simple as like, this is positive or this is negative, that kind of stuff can really matter. And so, try to let that be enough. And remember that even if you don't understand the passage, the choices are usually much easier to understand. They'll certainly be shorter. They'll focus on very specific things that then you can go looking for in the passage. And so I definitely come out of a lot of those passages having no idea what's going on myself. But I trust the process. I know that when I go to the answer choices, I'm going to learn some stuff. I'm going to get specific words that kind of stand out to me. And I do want to do a reading passage question. So maybe this is a good time for that to kind of show you what I mean. But let me just make sure I got all these questions done before I get to that, because that is a good question. But I think another part of your question or part of the answer is don't try to reread it a million times. I think try to evaluate your own history. How often does rereading the passage help you understand it, right? Like how often when you reread it, do you go, oh, that's what they're saying? If that doesn't happen, then why are you rereading it? Like you're just wasting time, right? You have to kind of accept the loss and move on. And so for me, at least, that's kind of what I always do is I get out of it. I'm like, I'm a smart guy. If I don't understand this, it might just be hard to understand. let me see what the choices are saying. Maybe that will be a better place to understand things. And so it takes a little faith in the process. But I think for me, it comes down to like, I kind of know when rereading won't help me. When I'm like, okay, these words all made sense. The overall idea doesn't. Let me just move on. Let me see what matters. I think that's more of what it is. When I get confused, it's more that I'm like, I don't know what idea in this whole thing matters. So rereading it, I'm just going to look at the same ideas again. I don't, that doesn't help me necessarily focus on the one that's going to be the most important, but the choices will focus me on the most important thing. So I kind of just let it happen, and going to the choices really helps for that. I always do more work in the choices than I do in the passage. So we'll get back to your question too. I think that was a good answer for now, but I will come back to it. Circle equations, quick recap on circle equations. Then you can do that right here. Go to this page, my website, XY plane, circle equation lesson. It's right there. And it's going to talk about x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. A very useful equation for probably one question on your entire test. All right, Sarah notices she panics a lot more with math, but I've gotten a lot more comfortable practicing. I'm still worried about doing it on the test. I have no anxiety for reading, writing though. Anything I could do to work on that? Well, try to understand where the anxiety is coming from. If the problem is that you get to the math section and you kind of like don't remember some things, one piece of advice is remember they give you that piece of scratch paper right away as soon as you sit down. Now you can't write on it until the actual test starts. I don't want you getting in some sort of weird trouble because you're doodling on the scratch paper while they're reading the instructions. But once you hit that button to start the first reading section, a place where you probably feel comfortable and know you have tons of time, well, just start writing down any sort of math notes that you want to make sure that you remember for the, an hour from now. Like you can write down little strategies like plug points into equations. And where is it? Yeah, plug points into equations is, where is it? Oh, there it is. It's at the bottom for some reason. I got to fix that. But there it is. For some reason, it's out of order. But yes, plug points into equations, most important math strategy. Literally just writing PPIE on your page might help you understand it when the time comes. Like, because all that work you've been doing in the hard reading module, it's going to drain you. And so it might be nice to have some notes that you've written at the beginning of the test that you can then go back to in the math test. It's the same scratch paper the whole time. And remember, you guys can ask for more scratch paper. Just raise your hand and they've got to give it to you. So make sure you know that. But otherwise, with math, I think this kind of relates back to the question about the passages is just remember, you are not going to have an intuitive plan for every single hard math question. You don't have to. Most of the time when I look at a hard math question, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know that like plugging points into equations generally works. There are certain things I can do in Desmos, like a regression, that generally work. And so I have some tools I can reach for. And you get good at knowing which is probably the right tool in the situation. But very rarely am I working on step one of a math question, knowing what step 2 or step 3 are going to be. I just, step 1, plug points in equations. I just dive in, just take a leap of faith. And suddenly you kind of realize the problem kind of solves itself. But some people really need to plan everything out. And maybe this is you, Sarah, you panic when you can't see the full plan ahead of time. Well, you can't do that. You got to be able to be flexible. Okay. When you're short, this is dragon fruit. When you are short on time and you aren't able to fully understand the harder readings, any tricks on guessing more correctly? Okay, good. This might be the best time for this question. So yes, I do have tips. Let me just make sure I got anything else. Exo King. I don't know if I should pronounce it like joking. Is it like a j sound with the X? But the commas, I just feel like I know them until I read a very hard SAT questions. Any advice? The commas, definitely just go to my website here and go to grammar and just basically anything that says punctuation is good to go. Positives, I should probably put punctuation on that. Conjunctions, connector placement. So much of this has to do with commas. And remember, commas are always kind of our last resort for punctuation. We want to think about other things first. Semicolons, colons, dashes, periods, all that stuff is way easier to understand. So the comma is kind of what we're left with. And a comma is just a break in a sentence. So sometimes kind of the same thing I've been saying about the passages in the math. I don't understand a sentence when I first read it, but I know that commas are showing me where all those breakpoints are. So I'm kind of like figuring it out as I go. And like, okay, what if this part were removed? What if that's an extra clause? So I'm kind of just like moving through it that way and trying to figure it out as I go. And that's so much about it. Okay. I do see, Victor, you got a request, but let me do my question first. Actually, I know what I can do. Have I done this question before? Let's use my new thing and let's see if it's in the question bank. Let's see if this actually works. So 825 DC 766. You got to enter them all. Search. There it is. I don't need to do it. Just search my new thing. It's right there. I've already got a video. So no need for me to do it now. There it is. Perfect. Worked perfectly. Oh, I get so many Grammarly ads. So there you go. There it is. King Lear. Now this is from Digital SAT 3, which used to be an old practice test. It was retired. So it's fair game. It's not going to spoil any practice tests, I don't think. So you should be good there. Cool. All right. Let's do not this question. Let's do the passage I want to do. Actually, yeah, let's do the passage first. I'll come back to this one. Okay. Here's the passage. I'll make it bigger. And I'll put the choices over here. Okay. All right. Is my head in the way? No. Should be good. All right. So I'll put a poll up so you guys can answer it. But give this a shot. You're on your own before I talk about it. Let's do start a poll. Passage answer A, B, C, D. Start poll. We've got far fewer people this time than the August SAT. Yeah, far fewer people doing this. I wonder if it's the Monday night. I wonder if it's the SAT is less popular in September, but lots fewer people hanging out. I know this isn't a terribly hard one, but it gets some important ideas across. I'll answer some questions you guys are working. Yasser, do you think a 750 reading and 700 math is a huge discrepancy? Absolutely not. No. That's like margin of error too. Like if maybe you got, let's say, you got a little lucky on reading, a little unlucky on math, suddenly they could flip, My head is melting. What should I be practicing these last few days? Well, I definitely think make sure you're not cramming the night before the test, because then your head will be melting as it absorbs too much information. So lots of things that you can do in the last week. The vocab, grammar review, those are very good for reading. They're very low key, very easy to absorb things. And then in math, geometry and statistics are topics that have a little bit of memorization, but that XY plane stuff, that category that I've got is really good. There is a lot of memorization involved with lines and quadratics and exponentials and all those things. So those are good things to do. All right. I'm going to get 1,500 on the SAT in 1 month for the October. I've been practicing and get a 1260. So you got some work to do, Luke the man. That's a big jump in just under a month. So I recommend that you might want to watch my recent lesson on the score improvement. I'll get that video, and I will share that link because that is a good one. And that'll kind of explain how it's going to work. And I'll talk about this question after I get that link, which I'm having trouble finding. See, this is why I made this new site. I got to organize it better, but gosh, I have too many things that I can't find of my own stuff. All right. Here. This video, very good on the scoring. I think that's a great one for everyone. If you haven't seen it, it just talks about how score improvement tends to work and how the numbers go and what you should expect as you prep. And yes, there are going to be jumps in the score, but there are also going to be times where it's kind of laying flat. And so, thinking about that, really important. So we got a lot of answers here. So let's end the poll. And then I'll talk about this one. So this is a great example of a question that I would not want to take very long for most people because it really follows our sense of like trap answers and things like that. So this would be something I'd be reading very quickly as I go through it. I'll try to highlight a little bit of what would stand out to me as I'm reading it. So biologist Hilda Roon has spent 3 years observing the social behavior of central bearded dragons in their native Australian habitat. Good for her. Her research focuses on a particular head bobbing display that these lizards perform when encountering other members of their species. Great. Roon discovered that the rhythm and intensity of this head bobbing varies significantly. So right there's a lot of variety, varies significantly, and that seems important. Depending on the specific situation, slow, deliberate bobs typically signal submission, while rapid, vigorous movements often indicate territorial aggression. So right there is a good example of something that I'm going to highlight it just so I can talk about it. But there is no part of your brain that should be trying to memorize that sentence and trying to understand that. That's filler. That's extra. And even if it is important later, it's not going anywhere, right? We can come back to that. The thing that matters is that it varies. I can look at how it varies and the specific ways it varies later. Right now, that's just reinforcing the main general dumb idea of the head bobbing varying significantly. So this piece is a great example of like, that passes from one ear to the other out of my brain without ever getting stored. So you got to be able to think of things in that way. It doesn't really matter like those kinds of specifics. And if you're worried, oh, I didn't understand that, I didn't memorize that, what are you doing? Then, of course, the most important word of any passage is but. We've got one coming up. However, Roon's most intriguing finding involves a third pattern, a moderate rhythmic bobbing that occurs when bearded dragons encounter unfamiliar lizards of similar size. Okay, again, there's more bobbing. They bob, that's all. This intermediate display appears to serve as a form of social assessment, allowing the lizards to evaluate potential threats or allies before committing to either aggressive or submissive behavior. So they bob for different reasons. That's literally my dumb summary. I'm going to write that on the top. I don't have much space, but let's get it in there. Dumb summary. They bob for different reasons. That's it. That's not complicated, right? And I'm sure there's more information, but like, I don't know, we'll worry about it if we need to worry about it. Choice A, bearded dragons frequently use head bobbing to establish dominance over other lizards in their territory. Without even finishing that thing, the word frequently stands out to me. This is what we talk about with strong words, trap answer choices. Frequently is a word that really scares me. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but like, did we really talk about how frequently these guys do it? They head bob for different reasons. Is dominance one of those reasons? Is it the most frequent reason? There's a lot about this that kind of scares me, so I don't love it. Let's continue. Roon's research proves, like another word that scares me, that bearded dragons are more aggressive than most other reptile species. We never talked about other reptile species. We're certainly not quantifying the numbers, right? So this is all stuff that falls into those common trap categories. And proof is very, very scary on the SAT. We are getting, 4 sentences about this one person's one experiment or whatever you want to call it about these lizards. We didn't prove anything, right? We learned some information, we got some evidence or something. Proof is very, very difficult in science generally, but also specifically, on SAT passages where we're just kind of really narrowly focused on one thing. So I'd be much more confident B is wrong. C, bearded dragons use different head bobbing patterns to communicate various messages to other members of their species. Various, different, where is it? Where'd it go? Varies. Oh, there you go. Right. I mean, this is pretty dead on the same words. That's a pretty good sign. But notice how non-specific it is, right? It doesn't talk about any specific head bobbing pattern. It doesn't talk about any specific message that they're communicating. It's just very bland in general. So a lot of people are not going to like that choice because they're like, oh, it's not summarizing this passage very well. It's not detailed enough. Because I bet your English teacher has always said, you got to include more detail, get more specific. But like, that's not the point of an SAT question. Our job is to just summarize it. Summary is always going to have fewer details than the passage itself. So I really like this. I wouldn't pick it. You never pick an answer before you've read everything, but like, I love how vague it is, how weak it is. Those are good qualities in an answer choice. The fact that it doesn't get specific is what makes me like it. D, the majority of bearded dragon, well, there you go. Already, I don't love it. Majority of bearded dragon social interactions involve complex behavioral displays that scientists have only recently begun to understand. Did they talk about time? Is this recent? Or is this just like one experiment that they've done? Like, how have we been perplexed by the bearded dragon's behavior for centuries? Like, what are we talking about here? Plus, the majority of their social interactions, we talk about 3 different head bobbing things. That is not the majority. Majority means most, and we just don't have that evidence. So again, a word that scares me. C is definitely the answer. A, again, I kept it because I'm like, oh, if nothing else is good, this might be something I settle for. But they don't dominate other lizards in their territory, right? Like they talk about them being submission. So one of the bobs is about submission, right? So another one is aggression, fine. And the third one is when they're like trying to figure out what the deal is with the other lizard. They're assessing them, right? So as it is, we talk about 3 different head bobs. Only one of them is about aggression and dominance. The other 2 are not. But even still, they never quantified it. They never said, oh, they use this head bob much more than the others. So I don't want a choice that does that. My point in this question is like, notice how little of the passage I needed to understand to get this answer. This is a generally kind of medium level question, maybe on the easier side, but I think it's mostly easy because of how well the strategies work here. The dumb summary is really dumb and it fits. The answer choice, a very clear trap answer words, strong words that would stand out. And I'm not doing a whole lot of thinking as I go through this passage. That's really, really important that like you don't overdo it. Don't waste brain power trying to understand things that might not matter for the passage. That's how we get there. So for me, this would be very, very easy. If I weren't talking you through it, I would get this right probably in a minute. It takes a couple seconds to read the passage, but other than that, this is over in a minute for sure. So, that leaves me time for some of the stuff that's more difficult, but there you go. So, what do we think? Did this kind of hit on some of the topics we were talking about before? Let's see. We're looking to read backwards here. Let's see. Yep. Thank you. Yeah. Simple yes is great. Yeah. Joking. I'm going to keep saying it that way. This type of question shows you that just because the passage is big doesn't mean that it's actually hard. Very well said. Yes. And obviously it's hard in the moment to kind of figure that out, right? Like we have to make really split decisions about the different passages and which ones we're going to do and which ones we're going to skip. That can be really hard and stressful. But hopefully by the time you take the real test, you've practiced enough that you have like a sense of it. You're like, okay, this passage looks like it's not going to be something I'm great at. This passage looks like it's more in my wheelhouse. And that's fine. Go with that and hope for the best. But also sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes something that looks really complicated ends up having really obviously wrong answers. And so it ends up being not so bad. So just keep an open mind. But my advice is, the passage is only a piece of it. Like if the passage is hard, the choices might be easy. If the choices are hard, then the passage might be easy. Some questions will have hard things from start to finish, but not that many. Cool. Let's see what else we got. All right. Working back here. Yes. So I guess we're talking about some scores here. And yes, honesty, I think, is important, right? And I also think with scores, everyone wants a 1500, 1550, but like it's really, really hard to get. That's not to say that you shouldn't try for it. But I think in understanding how the scoring works, a lot of you are more likely to get higher scores overall. When we're really trying to get that perfect 800, which is really not possible, even me, I don't get 800s on the reading all the time. So, you gotta admit that there's going to be some defeats along the way. And then that allows you to say, all right, this question I'm going to sacrifice. I'm just going to guess randomly. I'm not even going to try it. Pick a random letter. I have a 25% chance of guessing it right. And then I'm going to use the time I would have spent struggling through this thing, doubling down on a question where I've got a better shot. And if I spend twice as much time on a question that I know I can get right, then I'm much more likely to actually earn those points. And so the score goes up because you're getting rid of things that are not likely to help your score, and you're saving the things that are. And I think that's really important. Like, you can get 2 or 3 questions wrong and still get a 750. You can get like 5 or 6 questions wrong and still get a 700. That's a great example of what I talk about in the lessons and guides, strategies, how to score X. Learn what to focus on for various SAT score levels. So if you are at a 600 in reading, then you don't want to watch the thing on a 750 reading. Get your way up there, right? Build towards the 700 first, right? Try to do it incrementally, and you will have a better time of it, and you will focus on the right things. This is another great playlist here, so definitely recommend that one as well. Cool. What else we got? Okay. Anoop, gotta go. See if you're still here. Let's see. I don't have any graph questions prepared. I didn't have any time to make any. So unfortunately, I don't have those. But I would say that I recently made a lesson on those right here. Lessons and guides, passages, right here, graph chart passage lesson. This is really good. I was pretty proud of this one. There's 2 questions in there that you can try. Those are good. And they'll give you kind of a sense of what you're up against. But I would say that a lot of the graph questions are, they're just like the passages. We're using the other passages. We're using the same strategies. It's just, we've also got this graph. And I tend to leave those kinds of passages for last. And I tend to leave the graph itself for last. I try to solve that question using a more dumb summary approach, thinking about what the passage is saying first, if I can. That tends to work. But again, I talk about it in that lesson. It's really good. So definitely think you should, yeah. Can I put the How to Score X playlist? Yes, I think so. Let's see. I think I've got it right handy. Yep, here it is. How to Score X. Let's see. Are all the questions weighted equally? No, but kind of yes. So that's another one that is a tough one to answer. The SAT is basically going to have every question be 10 points. That's probably the best way to think about it. So let me put some other things in this chat here for the scoring stuff. So, and one day, as soon as I have time, all of this, oh, damn it. Doesn't let me do multi-line. Hold on one sec. The one day, all of these things will be easy to find on this page that I've got here. But for now, I'm still putting it back together. So right here are 2 different lessons on how the scoring works. A basic lesson, that's all that most of you need to know, and a much longer lesson that goes into a lot of the math involved in the SAT scoring system. It's complicated and probably not worth most of your time, but in case you're interested, it is there. Cool. Yes. So dismal, I don't think you're right here. I know people say that, but I do not think that is right. So what dismal is saying here is, dismal, like the word dismal, D-I-S-M-A-L, I'm assuming, or is that your name? I don't know. But either way, getting easy correct is not necessarily worth less than the hard ones. The people, you would think, right? The hard ones have got to be worth more. It's not what it seems to be. I've looked at a lot of people's practice tests, and it seems to be that the easier questions are worth more. And if you think about it, and again, you can watch those videos on the scoring, it actually makes sense that the easy ones would be worth more, because what the score is supposed to represent is your skill level, your ability, right? I hate to use the word, but your intelligence, right? If you're getting easy questions wrong, that says more about your intelligence than getting a hard one wrong, right? A hard one, and you're like, oh, well, okay, sure, right? That's understandable. A hard one, most people are going to get this wrong, so it doesn't hurt you as much. It doesn't make you stand out as much in terms of the scoring. But those easy ones, the algorithm, the way it computes things, it's kind of evaluating that and saying, wait a minute, this person is getting these easy ones wrong. What's going on? And there's a little bit of, uncertainty about how this works. But basically, the idea might be that if you get a bunch of easy ones wrong, then when you get a hard one right, the algorithm, once again, is like, wait a minute, this person they don't know how to do math, right? They don't know how to do basic algebra. How are they getting this hard one right? Maybe it's just a lucky guess. And so it's kind of factoring all that in. It's not as simple as like, right and wrong and just 10 points here, 20 points there. It doesn't work like that. But it does mean that careless mistakes on this version of the SAT, I think, are particularly costly. And I think when people are nervous, they tend to make more careless mistakes. So for a lot of people, the reason they do worse in the real test is they're making mistakes because they're rushing, and they're making mistakes in places where they normally don't. And so when that score drops, it drops fast because you might still be getting those hard ones right, but you made mistakes along the way. And things like that problem solving and data analysis zone, that's where that tends to show up. For me, I don't classify things the same way. Numeracy kind of is that problem solving and data analysis. Percents, oh boy, percents are where people lose a lot of points. And then statistics kind of falls in that category. Frequency charts are a great example. Probability, these are places where people think they're doing really well and they're getting things wrong because they're not reading carefully. Percentages, in fact, are one of the worst places people lose points because of just how carefully we have to read everything. So I would say this is something I talk about in the study plan, specifically episode or step 7, master the middle. People always want to do the hard questions. They go to the question bank, they do all the hard questions. I'm just going to do the hard questions. I'm getting all the easy ones right, just want to do the hard questions. But then it's the problems that are showing up in the middle questions, those easy and medium ones that you're not catching. You're misreading things and you're moving too fast. And so, I would say another great thing to do the last week is don't do the hard ones. Go back to some of the easy and medium ones. See how fast you are. See how confident you are. If you're making mistakes on things that are supposed to be easy, that is more likely to affect your score than that one crazy hard geometry question that's going to drive you nuts afterwards. It's the easy ones. Cool. All right, let's see. Did we talk about that? That was a big idea that we just dropped there. Beckham, yesterday I took a practice test and got 740 English and 780 math. I don't know how to improve my English. You gotta study words, basically. Honestly, 740 is awesome. That's amazing. So at this point, it is a little bit about luck. Grammar has to be perfect. Transitions, outlines, they need to be perfect. And then try to just learn some vocab. I'll put that link to my vocab stuff back on here, but just you can change the website here and just put vocab instead of library, and it'll take you there. It's still a live page. I just forgot to link to it. But you can study words. It's a great thing to do in the last week. And honestly, it's tedious. It's annoying. But if you don't know what, verisimilitude means or obsequious and it shows up on the test, well, too bad. That's unfortunate. I do not think English is going to be harder. I think it's just going to be the same difficulty as always. I know I got to add the FAQ I got to add those ones in. No, Dismal, don't worry. No need to apologize. I get why you're saying that about the points. I think I've seen other tutors say it, and I just don't think it's backed up by the data. So I get where it's coming from. And it's also intuitive. You'd think hard ones are worth more points, right? That's how your tests in school work. But no, SAT is weird. Yasser, what score is the safe spot? It depends. It really depends on what you're aiming for. But I would say if you are anything above certainly 1400, you should be really, really proud and happy with that. And that's, I don't know that that's going to get you into a top 10 college. I also don't think that the difference between a top 10 college and a top 50 college is really that big at the end of the day. It's just what people talk about. So I think, 1400s are amazing. It's those are the kinds of scores you should be sending everywhere you apply. And then the rest of your application is certainly going to be great. But I would say anything even above 1200 is very respectable. And then of course, if some of you are not native English speakers, the reading score, just getting that even into the 600s, I think is impressive, because I certainly could not get a 600 or better on whatever the Spanish version of the SAT is. And I took 4 or 5 years of Spanish in high school. I do not have that level of fluency in that language. So if you're getting above average on a English test and you're not a native English speaker, I'm always impressed by that. So a lot of you guys beat yourselves up over that, but man, that's impressive. All right. I don't think I'll have other live streams. I just have a lot of tutoring to do, but I will try to release new things. So I don't think I'll have new live streams, Victor, before the September test. We'll see if I can. I'll obviously post it, but I doubt it. I am also running out of steam on this one, but let's see what other questions we got before we go. You guys have been, pretty good sticking around on this Monday night. So, what study plan would you recommend for the October SAT? So, see how on my site, lessons, guides, strategy, study plan, that's this thing. If you have not done any SAT studying, then just get through steps 1 and 2 by Saturday. You don't even need to take a practice test. At this point, if you haven't taken a practice test, you got maybe until like Wednesday afternoon to do one. But after that, don't be taking practice tests. So certainly steps 1 and 2. Now, if you've been studying, then just, you can go all the way back, just kind of maybe watch these videos, but the revisit and refresh one is kind of meant for this week. It's meant to be like, what should you be going back to? There are certain topics, certain like memorization heavy things that are really great for the last week, but also kind of revisiting the things that we started out with, the strategies, the essential memorization. I don't really think much of this last few days should be spent learning new things. I think you've been studying, you know what works, you have a plan, stick to it, review it, make sure it's good, make sure you're confident in it, and don't start changing new things like, 3 days before the test. Like, you might not be at your goal score, but you don't want to start falling back down because now you're trying out new things and you're not using strategies you're confident with. So stick to the plan. Try to, review things. The worst thing I think that could happen on the SAT is you get to a question and you realize you can't answer it because you've forgotten a fact, right? There's gonna be hard passages where it's not about a fact, right? But like, if you forget that the slopes of perpendicular lines are negative reciprocals, if you've forgotten what a semicolon does, if you've forgotten what the word nevertheless means, those would be things that would just like, that's a killer. Because that's preventable, right? That's just more basic memorization. So those are the kinds of things I think are really great for the last week. If just like make sure that stuff is solid in your brain. Solid. Yeah. You guys just chatted a lot. Oh boy. What else we got? I felt the grammar questions, Laura. Welcome, member. Laura, hello. I felt the grammar questions in the real test seemed easier, but also more confusing, and I couldn't spot the clauses as easily as in the practice test. Well, that seems like opposite things you're saying, but I kind of get it. The best part about grammar is it is so predictable. This is one place where I've been very thorough. My lessons basically cover everything. I need to make a lesson on dashes, but that's kind of covered in the punctuation lesson. That's pretty much it. Everything else is kind of here. So basically what we want to make sure we do is we kind of think of grammar as like a limited menu. I can't think of a question that I've seen since the digital SAT was released that didn't fit into one of these categories. So there's times where they're kind of playing with the category, where they're giving us a hard version of it, where they're giving us sentences kind of like you're saying, where the clauses are hard to find. But I don't think that changes our overall task. If they're doing anything with punctuation, if they're doing this to an ing rule for the verb agreement, we got to think about sentence structure, and the traps are fairly predictable. The task is very predictable. It might be hard to accomplish that task, but I think the fact that you know what you have to do is really, really important for grammar. And, I would say that's, again, another great thing to review is you really shouldn't be looking at a grammar question and being like, oh, I've never seen anything like this before. It's usually going to fall into a category. Yeah. Verisimilitude. I think you spelled it right. I think verisimilitude. Yeah. Verisimilitude means like the appearance of truth, right? So something appears to be true. So a lot of you who are cheating on your homework assignments using AI and ChatGPT, when it tells you information, it has a high degree of verisimilitude, the appearance of truth, but that does not mean it's actually true, right? It just looks true. It feels true. It sounds true. Very different. Cool. Which practice test is the hardest currently? I kind of said that earlier. They're all the same. If one feels harder to you, it is because it is attacking your particular weaknesses. It is purely a perception issue. 780 in math, but back to 750 due to errors in calculations. Well, Abdullah, you gotta be really careful. I'd rather you sacrifice a question and spend a little bit more time making sure those calculations are right. Get the 780, get the 790. And don't worry about the 800 because that might be what's causing you to go back down. So I basically just know that at some point I'm going to type something wrong on the calculator. So every time I type something on the calculator, I look and double check before I trust the answer that it's giving me. I'm like, did I type it right? Cool. Let's see. Yes, Laura, non-native English speakers, I give you guys a lot of credit. Like to take a very hard test in a different language than what you grew up with. I don't know. That's impressive. Yeah, dismal. Doing one test a week is pretty good, but if you're low on time, yeah, I think, a test a week is, even maybe more than you need. Like if you're doing this other stuff, again, this is kind of why I made the YouTube channel membership is like, it's really great to do practice tests, but I always think of practice tests as like a way to measure how well I've been practicing. The practice test is not the practice really. It's this other stuff of like, okay, have I mastered apostrophes? Have I mastered do I know how to do a Desmos regression, the number of solutions stuff? Have I mastered that? If you take a practice test, you're only going to get one question that's about the number of solutions for lines. Another question might be about the number of solutions for quadratics. That's two questions for those two topics that come up on every exam. But like, in order to really master those topics, you got to do more than just one question of each. You got to do a bunch. And so the idea is that, you're kind of seeing a set that is very dedicated to one thing. You see those patterns, you learn those patterns. Even when they ask it in a way you've never seen before, you're able to come back to those patterns and be able to kind of solve it, knowing it's still just a version of this question you've answered a bunch of times. So I think of like that as most of my practice. And then that's why in the study plan, if you do this one video a week, there's a practice test at week 3, a practice test at week 6, a practice test at week 9, and then week 10 is reviewing, and then week 11 or whatever is the test, the SAT. So practice tests, you also got to think about where you are in your process. If you're a senior and these are your last, SATs, then fine, just blow all the practice tests and just get them all done. But if you're a junior, if you're just starting out with this process, you don't want to waste those practice tests. I do not think we're going to get very many more. Maybe we'll get some in like January or February of next year of 2026, but I wouldn't count on that. Yeah. All right, we're all just talking about our scores, it seems. No, I do not. Someone just asked, Abdallah, no, do not take a practice test the day before the test. No, absolutely not. Rest your brain. No, I can be 100% certain of that. No tests for the day before, 2 days before, even 3 days before is pushing it. No practice tests. Relax. Yes. Abi, what would you suggest to do if someone wants to get a 1550 but is currently in the high 1400s? You're close. Honestly, if you have like a 1470, you probably know everything you need for the test. The difference between the 1400s and the 1500s is less about particular pieces of knowledge and more about skills that are like much harder to kind of quantify. Things like your ability to be flexible in different situations, to find the most efficient path. I'm going to share another video I made recently that I need to, again, put in this new library I built. Here it is. This is the top 10 most overlooked skills. Really good overview of just things that you might not expect the SAT is testing. In that 1550 zone, you really have to have no weaknesses, no imperfections. It's very hard to do, but that's really what it takes. And so, these other little more subtle things can start to make a big difference. Let's see, I'll answer a few more questions before I head out here. What would I recommend to do in order to improve in geometry, trig, and problem solving and data analysis? Well, those are kind of separate. I mean, the geometry thing is a lot of memorization. So, watch these videos, these lessons that I have on these different things. That would be pretty good. I'm pretty thorough here. And then for problem solving and data analysis, that's usually percents. People underestimate that. Everyone thinks they know how to take a percentage. Most people don't, or at least not in a way that's reliable. So I would say if you get things wrong and you're surprised by your lower math score on the SAT, my bet is it's percentages. So that would be a good thing to review to make sure you have a formula like the open formulas that I talk about in that lesson that are really, really good at keeping us organized because it does matter quite a bit. So that is, maybe a different problem than the geometry one. The problem solving and data analysis stuff usually comes down to an inability or a mistake with reading instructions. You assume you know what they're asking, and instead of reading it. And so just, it's something to be careful of because that's where they get you. They're definitely doing it on purpose. Let's see what else. Dismal. If you're nervous, yes, understandable, totally understandable. But you're also saying it's your first SAT. That's also a good way to think about it. Is most people are going to take the test more than once. So if you're taking it again, you've got another shot. It's okay, and that kind of freedom allows you to just be like, all right, I'm gonna do those strategies. I'm gonna stick to that. You can also super score. So if you get if you nail the reading, nail the math, then that kind of maybe locks it out for you for the future and makes it so that you don't have to worry about it as much. So the fact that you can take the test multiple times, I think is really useful for just kind of calming the nerves a bit. But also, nervousness never goes away. I don't think. I get nervous when I talk in front of large crowds. That's why I like to do this. There's no one in front of me. But yeah, it is one of those things where, you've got to be careful because we really want those feelings of nervousness to go away. And we assume that other people have somehow quieted those feelings, but it's less about that and more about just being able to manage them and realizing that the feeling might not go away, but how you respond to that feeling, that's a little bit more in your control. What else we got? Is it possible to get 740 in math if I got 690? Yeah, be more cautious. Look at those ones that you missed. I don't know how to say your name. That F. I don't Maria. I'm going to say. I'm sure I'm doing it wrong, but. Maria Gomez, yes. Is it possible with 740 in math if you get a 690 on your last practice test? It's possible, but I would say, 9 mistakes, you got to cut down to 4. And statistics is something you can memorize. So make sure you do that and the difference between mean and median and mode and how to read a frequency chart. All that stuff is really important. So it's all there on my site. All right. Dismal bye if you're still here. Yes, I'm glad I could help. And yeah, let me know the score. I'm going to be heading out soon. It looks like I've reached almost the end of this thing. Are you stupid for not depending on Desmos as much? No, Abdullah, I think most people are way too dependent on Desmos to the point where it becomes like an addiction and they can't help themselves. Everything was a Desmos question. But I don't know. I use it occasionally, but not all the time. Cool. All right. Risa, I'm sorry if you have a quick question, feel free to ask, but I'm also kind of done here myself. I'm getting a little losing my voice. Let me look at Laura's question first. One thing that concerns me is the SAT rounding system. How does it work? I can answer that too because I have a lesson on that. Where is it? I have it somewhere. Let's see. Here it is. All right, let me share that with you. This, I don't even need to say anything. Just watch this video on the SPR questions, student produced response. And otherwise, I think we're out of steam. You guys, me. So I'll just leave it with, check out this new resource. Give me some feedback if you, if you have any. I will continue to make it better. I'm going to add some links tonight, but I also will start to fill out this question bank thing a little bit more so that you guys can find my videos more easily. That's the goal, is that you can find them when you do have a question on something from a practice test from the question bank. You're able to find it and kind of see a quick overview, but more importantly, get right to that video. And there are things I don't have videos for, but at least you'll know that I don't have it. And then hopefully it will appear. Cool. Yes, open formula is amazing. I agree. Yes, that will save you those points on problem solving and data analysis I've been talking about. So I will leave it with that. The open formula, if you need to study it, lessons and guides, and numeracy, percents is about the open formulas. I'll add a little description there. If you are a channel member, you should check that out. We got 2 great things that I've written, 20 questions all about percents in the open formula. So you can check those out too. If you want to become a channel member, there should be a join button below any of my videos. It gives you information about that. And just, $5 a month, and you get access to all these questions that these things are linking to here. And they're all written by me to help you practice the topics and strategies. So it's a great thing to check out. But give it a look. And for all of you guys taking the September SAT, good luck. And for all of you taking later tests, October, November, I'll be back. So we'll do more of these for those tests as well. But in the meantime, yes, remember, when it comes to your scores, don't settle for less, Settele for more. I'm Mike Settele as always. Good hanging with you guys. Good luck on the test.